Hello and welcome to Film de Siecle, the film and media channel focused on all things 90s and 2000s. This week, Seb and Ollie will be discussing holes.
Hello and welcome back to Film de Siecle. I'm here with Ollie.
Hello.
And today we're watching the classic movie Holes.
Are we?
Yeah, Holes. It's based on a book, a very popular book, that was in a lot of English schools at least. I don't know about internationally, but was it Luis Sachar who wrote it? Something like that.
Luis Sachar.
Sachar. Yeah, I can never pronounce his name properly. Luis Sachar. But he only wrote a few books. But this was his obvious breakthrough hit. And I've got to say, from my recollection, it's probably the best book-to-film adaptation I've ever seen.
Well, to be fair, it's quite an easy-to-adapt book.
Yeah.
It's not terribly long, so you don't have to cut stuff out.
It's perfect for it, you're right.
Yeah. And it's reasonably grounded. There's nothing too fantastical about it.
Well, except for the whole, generational curse that leads to climbing up the mountain.
Well, yeah, but there's no CGI required for that.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Even that's open to interpretation. It could all just be superstition and loads of coincidences, but it's sort of framed in a way to make you think there's something more to it.
There is definitely within the story something more to it.
Yes.
The moment the curse is quote-unquote broken, the family who is synonymous for always having bad luck suddenly has good luck.
I just love this story. It's a great story. It's a great movie. Keep in mind, when I say it's probably the best book-to-film adaptation, I don't mean like it's the best movie based on a film, like Lord of the Rings, for example. I think it's the truest to the original spirit and intent of the original book.
And the original book lends itself very well to film adaptation, I think.
I think so too. It feels like it's got a three-act structure. Everything about this is Film 101.
Having said all that about it, I have never actually watched it start to finish in one sitting.
Well, you're in for a treat. It's one of my favourites. I'm quite an avid fan of this. It's on Disney+, so if you've got that streaming service, you can easily access it through those means.
Yeah. So I watched it at school in parts, because, we had hour-long...
They never had the time to show you a full movie, did they?
We had hour-long English lessons, and what we were doing in English was watching Holes. Yeah. And so I saw it over the span of a few weeks, an hour at a time.
I also just love that it's a story for all ages. If you're an adult, you'll take something away from it. If you're a kid, you'll take something away from it. It's just one of those stories that anyone can enjoy and anyone can relate to, because it tells so many stories. It's not just one story. There's lots of subplots. It makes you care about all the characters. The character work in both the book and the movie is just fantastic. Jon Voight, he's on point, as Mr. Sir.
Yeah.
I just remember thinking he is the perfect person for this role, because I read the book before I saw the movie.
I see.
Everyone is. Sigourney Weaver, oh my god. And even Transformers guy. My mind's gone blank. Transformers guy. A young him.
Shia LaBeouf.
Yes, Shia LaBeouf! What's wrong with me? Just do it! He's in this. And he's great in this movie. I think this was probably his breakthrough role, I believe.
I don't remember how he is in this movie, to be honest.
He plays Stanley Yelnats, the main character.
Yeah, I know who he plays. I don't remember how his performance was.
I thought pretty good. We're going to be refreshing our memories soon. So, What are your memories of this? I know you said that you watched it at school, but do you remember what you thought of it at the time?
Well, we'd just finished reading the book, so I was already familiar with the story. Quite freshly so. And basically I was just marking off the story beats that I'd read in the book at the time. I wasn't really paying much attention to how it works as a film. But, in hindsight, I do think it works quite well. I could be singing an entirely different tune in a couple of hours.
Well, yes, that's the great thing about Film de Siecle. We talk about what we remember of it from a nostalgia point of view, and how well it holds up today. in a modern mindset.
Yeah. See, when there is a film adaptation of a book, I always try to read the book first. I read Percy Jackson just because the movie seemed interesting to me, and I wanted to have read the book first. And I'm so glad I did, because if I'd watched that movie, I never would have read the book, and I like the book.
Imagine if somebody's introduction to the Dragon Ball franchise was Dragon Ball Evolution.
Oh God, I dread to think. I actually know someone whose is, and for that reason doesn't watch Dragon Ball Z.
I can't say I blame them. I can't say I blame them.
Well, this person has put it to me that they're sure that they liked Dragon Ball Evolution because actors they liked were in it, I guess, and they don't want to have to change that opinion.
Well, I hope they change their mind one day because, as long as you get a good start to it, there's a plethora of great stories in that franchise, and I think it's just something that everyone will get something from. Not unlike Holes, which we're meant to be talking about. Holes.
We're incapable of staying on topic, it seems.
As long as the listeners like it, I don't mind. But yeah, this is another one of those theme movies. We like those, don't we? We watched Bicentennial Man earlier this month, and now we're watching Holes.
Even though we haven't actually watched Bicentennial Man yet, we're recording these all in one day.
Well, don't tell people that. Yeah, right. But there's loads of themes. You've got racism. That's explored beautifully in this movie. It deals with prejudice. It deals with misuse of authority. It deals with greed. It deals with a lot of dark human emotions, but it never does it in a way that feels too dark for the story, and it never does it in a way that talks down to who's reading it. It's one of those that...
Actually, now that I think on it, shall I tell you a bit?
Yeah.
Where I was a bit taken aback.
Go on.
The poisoned nail varnish scratch scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the book drew out the description really long, and then in the film it was over in a flash. And I suppose it would have been, but for some reason I found that surprising.
Yeah!
How understated it was.
In the movie, or...?
In the film, yeah.
I don't remember it being overstated. I remember it being like a big...
I said understated.
Oh, I see, yes. Yeah. But yeah, I remember it being quite a big moment, because until then, in the movie, I'm not sure how it was in the book, she was always a lot more lenient than people expected. Like, everyone expected her to punish Stanley.
That was the turning point. Yeah, that was the turning point. She'd set herself up as quite nice to the kids until that moment, and after that moment, she shows herself. Well, she actually plays up the aggression across the board, not just towards Mr. Sir.
Yeah, well, the fact that she put Mr. Sir in his place after he'd be the one who's been predominantly pushing everyone else around and being cruel to everybody, because I like how each three of the characters are sort of bad in three different ways. Like, you've got Mr. Pendanski, Dr. Pendanski, sorry, I'm not giving this man his due respect, even though it turns out at the end he wasn't even a doctor. He starts off being really nice and respectful, like your usual school counsellor sort of character, and then, he's just really casually mean to, Zero for absolutely no reason. And then that's when you begin to think, wait a second, this guy's not what he seems. Mr. Sir is pretty bluntly, from the beginning, not very caring about the, children who he has responsibility for. The first thing he does is, deny Stanley a Coke. I like how they managed to get product placement in a movie where they're just stuck in the desert for 2 hours.
Yeah.
They somehow find a way. I love it. Although, to be fair, I think it was a Coke in the book as well, so maybe it was a book product placement.
You can actually say Coke in literature without naming Coca-Cola, and you can name products as long as you don't negatively associate them and give them reason to sue. Like, say, I could say that a character drinks Coca-Cola, but I could not say that the Coca-Cola company are putting mind control drugs in their product.
Yeah, so that's why he had to write out the scene where Mr. Sir takes a sip of the Coke, then spits it out and goes, "This tastes like horse shit."
Yes, exactly.
I wish that John Voight actually did that.
If this takes off, we're going to petition John Voight to make a video of him doing that.
The deleted whole scene. You can DH Shia LaBeouf in post. Like they did with Jeff Bridges and, Mark Hamill. But yeah, I think it's about time we go and watch this movie because it's a good one. We're going to have a good time, aren't we?
All right, let's do that.
And we're back. We watched that. Ollie, did you like it? That's our number one question.
Yeah, it was, it held up surprisingly well, I think.
Yeah, I know what you mean. If it weren't for the soundtrack, which I suppose feels a bit of its time, and how terrible the CGI is, then, I'd say, it feels like something that could be made, they don't make movies like that anymore, and it's kind of sad.
The book was only about 5 years old or something when the film was made.
The book exploded. I know we keep talking about the book, and we're not going to do that with every movie that's based on a book, because practically all of them are based on books, let's face it.
Yeah. I think it is particularly relevant here, though, as the screenplay was penned by the author of the book, which is a very rare occurrence with a film adaptation.
That's absolutely right. In fact, I remember when I watched it for the first time thinking, that felt just like the book. I can't put my finger on why. Turns out that must be the reason.
Yeah, it was very faithful. What was that? You did a bit of research on what the film originally was going to be, and it was less faithful. What was it?
I'm not sure I wrote it down, but I think it was going to be some sort of edgy dystopian thing set in the future.
Yeah, some sort of post-apocalypse scenario.
Yeah, it was post-apocalyptic. So basically they tried to turn it into Hunger Games, I think, and that didn't go down well. So they got Luis Sachar. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Well, I always heard it said Luis Sachar, but
That sounds more like an actual name, so I'm going to go with Sachar.
Yeah, well, that's how my English teacher at school said it, so...
Okay, yeah. Well, I think that person would be an authority on the subject, so yeah.
I would think so, yes.
Fair enough. But yeah, I am so glad that didn't get made. But Disney said it was too edgy and dark, which makes me wonder what the script is.
Yeah. Who was the original director?
I don't know, I'm going to look it up, hold on.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought it was a joke, like someone edited from Wikipedia, but I looked into it further, and yeah, that was originally going to be happening. Apparently, Stanley was originally depicted as being a beast in the book, which I don't quite remember, but yeah, they didn't want Shia LaBeouf to gain a huge amount of weight. They wanted him to remain buff.
Right. I remember, I don't know about obese, but I remember him not being in shape.
Yeah, well, Wikipedia says a beast, so we'll take that with a pinch of salt. Much like, I imagine, Stanley Yelnats took his food.
Sure, yeah, why not? It does mention in the book, and I remember this line word for word, Stanley wasn't one to leave food on his plate, no matter how it tasted.
Yeah, which is interesting, especially considering later he gets pretty terrible food.
This was when he was taking in how bad the food was at camp.
Yeah. Oh, here's something. The guy who was originally going to be writing and directing it was James Richard Kelly.
Right.
Who's known for the cult classic Donnie Darko and Domino, which are two, very gritty movies.
And he was going to make it into a bizarrely dark post-apocalypse scenario.
Well...
# release the Kelly cut.
I can imagine it being shot similar to Domino, actually, because that's a really... washed out looking movie. Starring Keira Knightley as a bounty hunter, apparently based on a true story. Quite a good movie. Yeah. Maybe we should do that one day.
Yeah, maybe. But we've spent nearly 5 minutes talking about the book and a hypothetical alternate version that was turned down.
I mean, you know how the Rise of Skywalker, Duel of the Fates script was released? I hope that the original Richard Kelly script gets released, where we get the violent adaptation set in a post-apocalyptic world. I like how Disney thought it was too disturbing for a children's movie. I mean, this is Disney, half of Pixar movies are nightmare fuel, so I dread to think what gritty holes would have been.
I remember being surprised by the cast. on a rewatch.
Yeah.
I didn't remember that Henry Winkler was in it.
No?
Eartha Kitt was in it. And, obviously Shia LaBeouf, but he wasn't...
Sigourney Weaver.
Sigourney Weaver, yeah. Shia LaBeouf wasn't as big a name at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I like what they did, because all the kids were basically unknowns. I mean, the end of the movie says introducing Shia LaBeouf, so this is his first, major
Oh, was
role.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew it was an early one.
Yeah, they do the whole Coming to America thing at the end, where they, overlay footage of your favourite characters with the names of who played them. Like what they did in Coming to America. Shrek 2 did it.
Yeah.
I don't know why more movies don't, because I like it when they do that.
Yeah, that's a good technique.
Yeah, but there were a lot of interesting techniques in this movie, actually. I mean, they did that, and we were looking for what it's called.
The weird slow motion thing.
Yeah, where they sort of track, and, it hasn't got the full FPS, if that explains it well.
Yeah, it lends itself particularly well to deserts as a setting.
Yes, it does. I mean, it felt very cowboy, because they mainly used it for the flashbacks, when gritty stuff was going down. And they also used it for character moments, like when Mr. Serb, spilled all the water. Yeah.
Speaking of, the flashbacks, I would watch a movie about Kate Barlow.
Oh, yes. That was the best origin story. That was so good.
Yeah. She got a proper villain origin story. Or anti-hero. I could quite easily imagine a film where Kate Barlow goes robbing rich people and setting the world to right in her own slightly misunderstood way.
Can I just say, actually, I hate that term, can I just say, does anybody ever just say, no, you can't?
Sometimes. Like, if you remember Matilda, Miss Honey goes, may I? No, you may not.
Yeah. Can I just say, Ollie?
No.
Aw, I wanted to say. I think the style of the book, where one chapter would be a flashback about either one of the earlier Stanley Elnats or about kissing Kate Barlow and Sam, that origin story, and how it would be intercut with a chapter about, the Stanley Elnats current day story.
Yeah.
Lends itself really well to film, because it's sort of hard to do that. Well, I say it's hard to do that. You've got shows like Lost and Darrow that have done it well, but I've not seen it done that well in film.
Well, it was a 2-hour time frame. That's less time for development, because you've got a plot to move along.
Yeah, I mean, it was the perfect book to adapt, because it's not so long that you're cutting out loads of stuff. And I feel like everything that mattered stayed in the film. There's not anything I think...
I mean, you could easily read holes in a day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kid's book. I mean, this book is used by English teachers to this day, I believe, and I think it's the perfect book for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's...
And when I say used, I mean for analysis. I don't mean like they throw them at the kids when they're misbehaving or anything like that.
Well, Holes is a pretty good introduction to certain topics for kids of that age. Like, I don't know...
Racism.
Well, yeah, I was going to start with racism.
I mean, I wasn't being flippant. I meant that sincerely.
No, it doesn't shy away from the depiction of racism. I mean, I remember in the book, I'm going to stop talking about it right now, that Stanley remarks how racism isn't really a problem, which just goes, well, at camp at least, which just goes to show that he's used to, or at least is familiar with the idea of racism being a problem.
I mean, you don't really think about it much when you're 12 or however old he was in the book.
No, but it's a good introduction to that subject, especially with the flashbacks. And, well, there are other themes as well.
You don't say. But what I really liked about the racism... What I really liked about racism, Ollie... No, what I liked about how it was depicted in the book was...
Well, that's a wonderful introduction to any train of thought.
Brand 2020.
What I really liked about racism, Seb Brand 2020.
But no, you've got the story where you've got this character called Sam. I'm just going to explain as if people watching hadn't seen this in a while and might have forgotten. He's an onion picker character who has his own boat. He goes across the lake to this area called God's Thumb, where these onions grow, which he purports to have, healing properties and also ward off the yellow-spotted lizards. But there's some truth to that, because, all the townspeople, go up to him and buy things off him, and they respect him for that. And, because of that, he's probably shielded from the worst of it, I think it's fair to say, because he's useful to people. And because he's likeable, he's got a nice personality, to be fair.
They treat him about as well as people would treat someone that is fundamentally a lesser citizen to them. I think it's fair to say.
I believe that Camp Green Lake is in Texas. So, it's in the south, and, that's not to, generalise here, but, it's one of those areas where there have been, particular historical issues, with slavery being one of the rebel states, for example.
And, of course, they treat him well until they don't, and he's killed for kissing a woman.
But that's when it goes up to 11. And basically, the only reason why the townspeople go after him is because Trout, who's the big son of the big influential person who owns the lake, sees that kissing Kate Barlow, before she's kissing Kate Barlow, is kissing Sam. Which is ironic when you think about it, but...
And he basically rats him out through jealousy.
Yeah, because he asked her out, and because she's not a total doofus, she, very quickly said no.
The duck may swim on the lake, but my daddy owns the lake.
I just love that quote. It's the
what a
funniest
weird
quote.
Flex.
It's such a weird flex, and I love it for that. He changed the subject. It would be like saying... Yeah, that's a nice tie you're wearing, but I've got a holiday chalet in the south of France.
This natural phenomenon may well occur, but my family has a lot of money.
Basically. And that tells you everything you need to know about the character, because he sounds stupid when he's saying it. He only impresses, like, the 5 other blokes who are with him.
Yeah.
I just love that. So yeah, that's one of the things I like about it. The guy who played him actually passed away very shortly afterwards, which is a shame. Yeah, he was in a car crash, and that could have been a breakout role for him.
Oh shit!
I know, the movie's dedicated to his memory. Yeah, I mean, he does a good job of playing a douchebag, and it's a tiny thing, but I like when they age him up in that flashback where he's forcing, the young warden, his granddaughter.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, it looked good, and he even looked more dishevelled when he eventually, confronts kissing Kate Barlow. I love how dark that scene is, how she just, has suicide by yellow-spotted lizard.
Yeah.
They don't shy away from that, and they could have done. Yeah. This is why Holes didn't need to be edgy. It was already realistic.
It was as dark as it was as dark as a kids' film could possibly need to be.
Yeah, not in a way that I say, if you've got small kids, don't let them watch it, because honestly, I think they'll get a lot out of it of any age, to be honest.
I think it's just dark enough to educate about uncomfortable subjects without being too much.
Yes, and I think it's the perfect, kids' movie, for lack of a better word. Here's an interesting bit of trivia. Did you know that Frankie Muniz, who played Cody Banks, was originally offered the role of Stanley, before Shia LaBeouf?
Right, because Cody Banks is the role that Frankie Muniz is known for.
What's he been in since?
He was Malcolm in the Middle.
Bloody hell, was he?
Did you not know that?
No.
Don't you dare cut that out. Live with your shame.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because he looks a lot different when he's older than when he was younger. I didn't realise they were the same person.
Yeah, Frankie Muniz was Malcolm in the Middle, and interestingly, he doesn't remember any of it because of head injuries or something, I don't know.
But the Cody Banks thing, here's something interesting, because it's all about this British spy. There was, when I was about 8 or 9, there was this talent scout who came to my primary school who was looking for a kid to play, like a young James Bond. And Mum was like, oh my god, you should audition for that. And I was like, well, yeah, but I'd sort of gone off Bond at that point, because when I was about 6, I went through a Bond phase, which is a little bit weird, but...
Yeah.
And then I just went off Bond, there are all these Bond movies, on my shelf doing nothing. I was like, nah, I'm not really interested. And then a few years later, I looked into it, and it turned out originally the Cody Banks character was going to be a lot younger. and that's what they were looking for, but none of the kids who they, had, screened too well in the role, so they ended up aging the character up and getting Frankie Muniz in.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a bit of a segue for you about my almost acting
completely unrelated movie.
I could have been Cody Banks, Ollie. I should have been Cody Banks. I'll go further and say that. I would have been awesome as a TV.
It should have been me.
Star. It should have been. How good would that have been?
Yeah.
But yeah, sum it up. You liked it and I liked it. So the answer to that is yes. We liked it a lot.
Holes was a good movie.
Holes is Holes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who else is in this? Because I remember Henry Winkler, who I didn't remember when I rewatched it.
John Voight.
Shia LaBeouf.
John Voight.
Which one was John Voight?
Playing Mr. Sir. The very famous actor of his time.
Yeah. Sorry, John Voight is a name I know, but I can't ever put it to the face.
Yeah. His daughter is Angelina Jolie.
Ah, cool.
So I think that's what he's most famous for these days. But he was an actor in his own right. He was in a lot of movies.
Yeah.
And I really liked him as Mr. Sarah in this.
Yeah, he was really good. I have a completely different opinion of certain characters now than I had back then. If that makes sense.
That's interesting. Tell me more.
It never really struck me as... Like, Dr. Pendanski is the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He always struck me as the nice one when I was a kid. It's only now I realise how passive-aggressive he is.
Yes, he is not nice. It was a thing in the book as well, but in the book it was more it was less thinly veiled. It was quite well covered up until later on. The only real alarm bell is just how unaccountably horrible he was to Zero for no good reason.
Yeah. I mean, he was the good cop for everyone else. And then, when it came to Zero, he's just, I don't like you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that they kind of rushed through in the books, in the movie that they didn't in the book. And I know we promised we wouldn't talk about the book, but who cares? It's our show, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
Anyway, in the book, the whole thing about Mr. Pendanski, because he was a Mr. and not a doctor in the book. I'm being a purist here. He's Mr. Pendanski. His whole thing about being nice and being this sensitive, understanding counsellor went on a bit longer in the book until it became clear that he was just probably the biggest stick of them all in some aspects.
Yeah. I mean, Mr. Sir was, I'm trying to find a good word here. He wasn't the nicest, but you got the sense that he was just doing his job.
Yeah, he was probably the nicest of the three, to be honest, even though he was the most, what's the word?
He was
brash.
the most cantankerous.
Yeah, because the first thing he does is hands out a Coke, as if he's expecting Stanley to take it and have a drink, but really he's just handing it to the other guy.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing he does. And the second thing he does is frighten Stanley about the yellow-spotted lizards. Although, to be fair, he is warning him, so... he's, out of the three, he's the one who comes closest to doing their job in a responsible way, which is funny when you're considering he's a gun-toting, trigger-happy, easily angering...
Redneck.
Redneck, basically, yes.
Yeah.
At least he doesn't hide it, and you can respect that about him.
He doesn't actively antagonise anyone until... Stanley gets him poisoned by the warden.
Yeah.
And that is a mark against his character because, that was an accident. Nobody knew that was going to happen.
No.
And, he's not right to blame Stanley for that, but, none of them are perfect, but he's probably the closest to a responsible adult.
Which is frightening when you think about it.
It is. It's terrifying that of the three Holes counsellors, for lack of a better term...
Authority figures.
Of the three authority figures at Camp Green Lake, the closest to a responsible adult is Mr. Sir.
I know, that's brilliant, because, at first it looks like he's the worst of the three, because the warden is surprisingly lenient the first few times, and you don't see her until halfway through the movie. They really build her up well.
You first see her on a good day because she thinks she's getting closer to the thing that she's spent her entire life searching for.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that context is important.
Yeah, and it's only when Mr. Sir wastes her time with the whole, sunflower seeds thing, which I love, by the way.
Yeah.
Because you get a sense that he's trying to improve himself in some way, which is a little bit wholesome. No pun intended.
Yeah. I've only ever given you respect and affection. What was the line?
That was the line.
Oh.
I just love the way he says it. I didn't catch it until that time we watched it.
Yeah. That's meme fuel, that is.
Yeah, but the other thing that I think they didn't build, they didn't pace out well, but there was two things, that didn't transfer well from the book to film, and it's only really two things, I'd say, is one, it's how Mr. Pendanski is pretty horrible to Zero from the get-go, and it's not really, revealed over time that he's not a nice guy, and the other, I would say, is, the whole Zero thing, because, it's established early on that he says nothing. Pretty much every line of dialogue ends with Zero said nothing, which I think is brilliant because this is in the book, by the way, because it reminds you that he's there and that he's not saying anything. And they do that really well in the movie as well, because usually the last thing you see in a scene that involves, like, the detent kids is Zero.
Yeah.
You see him watching Stanley write the letters. You see that he's ready to come to his aid when he gets into that scuff because he picks up the 8-ball and is ready to, smash that guy across the head.
Yeah.
And he is a real brawler, that kid.
Yeah, he was going to choke that big guy out.
Yeah, he was going to smack someone across the head with an 8-ball if, they didn't intervene on Stanley's behalf.
And he knocked Pendanski out with a shovel, which was cathartic.
He did. I mean, that kid's brutal. I love him.
Yeah.
I like how he's like a gender-bended Rue from Hunger Games, because he serves a similar role, like the smaller kid that the main character looks after.
Now, hold on, let's get our timing right. Rue was a gender-bended Hector Zeroni.
Bloody hell, you're right.
I don't know, when was the Hunger Games written? Like the books?
I think it was much more... It was around 2008, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah. Basically, Zero's whole thing for most of it is that he doesn't talk. And the reason why is because he doesn't really consider anyone else worth talking to. He's sort of got a point when you consider the company he keeps. But the first thing he says is, when he asks about the sneakers, which it's revealed that he stole later on. And that's like 5 minutes into the film.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really establish his whole silent thing.
Good setup there.
Yeah, it's good setup, but it happens too early in the film. Like, it should have happened like half an hour in to give, us the whole Zero doesn't say anything, because, to be honest, we only really have, Mr. Pendanski's word that he doesn't say anything, in the movie.
Yeah.
Because he says something in the next scene. Whereas in the book, it was a big thing when he finally spoke.
Yeah.
Yeah, that probably could have been done better. How well, Ollie, did the film accomplish its goals, and what were they?
Very well, I think, because the artistic purpose of Holes the movie was to be a visual adaptation, a movie adaptation of Holes the book, and it did that well.
Oh yeah, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
It's the closest thing I can think of to the perfect adaptation, in my view.
Yeah, and, well, good adaptation doesn't automatically mean good movie. However, Holes, I think, was a really good premise to adapt. There was nothing particularly exclusive to its medium in there.
No.
The Shining is a very different film to the book.
You don't
but
say.
I like the film a lot more. Yeah. Not to Holes the book, I mean to the book The Shining.
Oh, I see what you mean. I was going to say, there's kids. I suppose there's a link there.
Yeah. I was using an example of changes to the source material being a good thing.
Yes.
I haven't read it, but you could also apparently, I've heard you could also list The Godfather in that category as an unfaithful adaptation that is a better film for it.
And this is going to be contentious, but I've heard similar things said about the Lord of the Rings movies.
I said similar things about the Lord of the Rings movies. That's where you heard it.
Yeah. I've heard other people say it, but, I'll take your word for it, because those books are tomes. I don't know when I'm going to get the time. Did you know that Christopher Lee read the Lord of the Rings books once a year?
That might as well be magic to me. I read it for the first time last year, and both... well, that's another topic for another time, but they both, book and film, have pluses and minuses for me.
Yeah.
I preferred... They're different experiences. I think I prefer the film Fellowship of the Ring to the book Fellowship of the Ring on the whole.
Yeah.
But I am glad to have experienced both of them.
Yeah, I can't blame you.
Yeah. But, I imagine we'll get to that eventually.
I imagine we will as well. Yeah, I think that the film accomplished its goals perfectly. It set out to make a film adaptation of Holes. It set out to tell the story to children, and families. Anyone of any age can watch this and enjoy it. There's something for everyone here. And it explored the themes well. Everything translated perfectly, in my view.
Yeah, I think the best kids' films are films that can be enjoyed by everyone regardless of age. So, to your point, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue about, little things like the soundtrack with Shaggy and stuff like that. But, I think this is going to be, just as good 50 years from now.
Nothing ages faster than contemporary music references.
No, and I like that most of the soundtrack is instrumental. Yeah. I mean, I think, for what it's worth, I think that the contemporary music, fit in well. It was upbeat. It fit the kids well. It
was atmospheric enough.
Yeah, it was atmospheric. It's not going to age badly, I don't think.
Or at least no more badly than it has already.
Yeah, I mean, if they were using the contemporary music of today, I don't think it would have fit the themes of the book as well. And that's not me being, an old, boomer complaining about today's music.
If you must use insert songs, use classics.
Yeah, although, again, classics can be cliche, so,
Yeah. Even then, be careful.
Yeah, it's like, I don't think any more movies need to have, Hot Chocolate, I Believe in Miracles.
Yeah, true.
I'm quite happy.
Although, on the subject of insert songs, you don't see studios hiring artists to write a song for movies anymore.
Oh, I loved it when that happened. I mean, you had some classics. You had Lion King with Elton John writing the soundtrack. You had Phil Collins writing Tarzan.
My Heart Will Go On wasn't the last one, was it?
No, Tarzan came out a couple of years later, and that had a soundtrack by Phil Collins.
Yeah.
Which I think's perfect, although I don't know why they didn't ask Peter Gabriel. I mean, maybe they asked him first and he was busy and, he was signposted to Phil Collins. I would have loved a movie with a Peter Gabriel soundtrack, and I will die on that hill.
You know what? I think the next standalone MCU property to come up that needs a selling point should do that.
That would work so well, because, you've got the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, which perfectly use a lot of older songs. That does it right. It doesn't do anything too cliche or too well known. I mean, you could argue that Hooked on a Feeling is as well known as it is today because of, Guardians of the Galaxy. It was a bit of a meme music video around 2006 because David Hasselhoff did a cover and the music video was really weird. And that was all over the internet around 2006. But, beyond that, that song might have faded into obscurity if it weren't for Hooked on a Feeling. Not the other way round. Yeah.
My point being that insert songs can be good if used properly. One day we'll learn to not go on huge tangents that are far removed from the subject, but it's not this day.
I like to think that's why people watch us.
I like to think it doesn't detract from the experience.
Yeah. But
bold of you to assume that people watch us. We haven't launched the channel yet at time of recording.
No. But to sum up question 2, I think the film accomplished its goals perfectly.
Yeah.
Number 3, the question is, Ollie, did the movie exceed your expectations?
It did. It did. I first saw it when I was a kid. I first saw it in English class in parts, and my only frame of reference for a book-to-film adaptation at the time was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which was similarly faithful. So, I hadn't yet experienced, let's say, a Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief level bad adaptation.
Young Ollie must have had such a good life.
He did. He really did.
This is sad, because we know what's going to happen with Percy Jackson.
And then life ground him down into the bitter husk of a man that you see before you.
This got tragic quickly.
No, that went places.
Yeah.
No, but
that escalated quickly.
But what I was saying was, I hadn't experienced a bad adaptation yet, and
no. So you sort of took it for granted that they were all good.
Yeah, I sort of took it for granted that they were all faithful, at the very least. I understood why Harry Potter had to cut some stuff out. As my primary school English teacher, who read the book to us, said, if you included all of it, the film would be about 9 hours long. And, I don't care how good the film is, you're not going to sit through it for 9 hours.
And, I think it's fair to say that the Harry Potter books are not paced in the way a movie is. You know, they're a lot more plodding and probably more like a serialised TV show, to be honest. Whereas, Holes feels like a movie, but as a book.
Yeah.
You'd be forgiven for thinking that the book was the book adaptation of the film, not the other way around, because I'm not going to say they're interchangeable, because that wouldn't do either justice, but do you know what I mean?
I think the fact that they were both written by the same person goes a long way to that, but I also think that Holes does inherently lend itself well to film adaptations.
Agreed.
Did the film surprise me? Yes, it did.
It was a little bit better than I was expecting. I was already expecting it to be amazing, because I remembered it being very good.
The only metric of quality I had at the time I first watched this was, did that or did it not happen in the book? Yeah, I wasn't that fussed about whether the film was, strictly speaking, good or not. I wanted to see that book I read, but a film.
And I think it's fair to say you got that.
Yeah, it is very fair to say I got that.
Yeah. It exceeded my expectations. It will probably exceed yours again if you've not seen it in a long time. And it's on Disney Plus, by the way, so you can access it through that if you've got that particular streaming service.
Yeah. It's also a pretty good film in its own right.
Yeah.
Is what I've been trying to get at. I wanted to say that because I just thought, as a kid, I didn't care whether it was good or not. I wanted to see the book I read in a visual sense. But it does just happen to be a good film as well. So.
Yes, absolutely. I think we're ready to move on to question 4.
There's a question 4?
There's 6 questions.
Oh. Wow, we're 40 minutes in.
Yeah, that's how much there is to discuss. Okay, Ollie, question 4. Is there an element in this film that specifically appeals to you?
Not really.
We've just been singing its praises for 40 minutes.
Yeah, I know, but there isn't a specific element that I would pick out above the rest. It's all very cohesive.
It's just everything comes together.
Nothing about this is specifically my jam, if I'm being honest. No,
it just is.
But, I wouldn't have... I didn't go to see Holes in the cinema, and I wouldn't have if I didn't, already know it was good. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel like a cinema movie, which is interesting because it's quite visually impressive in a lot of respects, although the CGI is terribly dated,
Yeah, but mercifully it's not present that much.
Yeah, it's only really for the yellow-spotted lizards when they're doing something. When they're stationary, they use real-life lizards, but I think the reason why the CGI is so bad is because it's so jarringly different to the stationary real-life lizards, which are just real-life lizards that have been painted. Yellow-spotted lizards is a fictional breed of lizards.
Yeah. that will kill you almost instantly with a bite.
I just like how they add in threats like that. You've got the drought as a threat, you've got the three, people as a threat. You've just got so many obstacles to overcome.
Yeah.
It's really atmospheric. But yeah, this movie is the first one we've talked about, I believe, which has been a financial success. It had a budget of 20 million and box office of 71.4 million. So, it's raised, accounting for inflation, probably almost as much money as it cost to make Bicentennial Man.
Is that going to be our metric now? Did it do better than Bicentennial Man?
Yeah, this movie is worth 1.4 Bicentennial Men.
Yeah.
I'd say that there are elements of this film that specifically appealed to me. I think it did social issues perfectly. I mean, we've touched upon how it handled, issues of race and prejudice. It also did things like police brutality quite well.
Yeah.
Because, you can't trust the cops in this universe.
Yeah, this is true.
One thing I think is quite subtle but interesting, and I'm sure it was intended. I mean, Luis Sachar's too intelligent for it not to be. You've got Stanley, who's sent to Camp Green Lake for stealing the shoes. And then you've got Zero, who actually stole the shoes, and then ended up in Camp Green Lake a lot sooner for a different crime. It's interesting how he got sent to, Camp Green Lake a lot sooner than Stanley did.
Yeah.
Because he was already quite well established there, because everyone knew him. I mean, he's at the back of the queue, so, he's not been there long.
He's at the bottom of the pecking order.
Yeah, I like how the pecking order is established, because you've got X-Ray, who's sort of the leader of this band of kids, who probably wouldn't be that impressive in the outside world, but, he thrives on the Camp Green Lake system. And he's got everyone following him. I think it's quite well established in the book, but it doesn't really come across on film why everyone respects him and follows him so much. I think it's just because he's so good at asserting himself. Like, the first thing that he says to Stanley is, it's your first day, so you wouldn't mind if I took your bread, and he just takes it without waiting for an answer.
Yeah.
And that feels so right. Like, if you ever went to school, which I assume most of you did, unless Son Goku's watching or something, there are these sort of, kid hierarchies, aren't there, that establish, you've got your queen bees, you've got your X-rays, and it just feels so right when they do this. You've got Theodore, who basically doesn't like to be called Theodore, and, I like the moment at the end where he says, tell my mom Theodore said I was sorry, it's sort of... Because, the whole thing about this is it's meant to be character building for the kids, according to Mr. Sir.
Yeah.
And in a way it is, but it's not in the way that the judicial system intended.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, the whole thing is just a long con.
Yeah.
That they started this correctional facility to get the kids to unwittingly dig for treasure.
Which I think's brilliant. It's genius.
Yeah. That is a sentence that accurately describes Camp Green Lake.
Yeah. And what I like is that the two wardens, the warden's two underlings, Mr. Sayre and Mr. Pendanski, it's never actually established to what extent they're in on the plot.
Yeah, it's vaguely established that they are in on it to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Pendanski knows they're not looking for fossils.
Yeah.
He knows that much at least.
Yeah, I mean, do they know what they're looking for, or do they just know vaguely what to look for?
I mean, the funny thing is that the warden doesn't even know what she's looking for, because she doesn't know what's in the chest, other than it's assumably very valuable. I mean, for all Trout Walker knew, it was just a massive troll on Kissing Kate Barlow's part, and there was nothing in the chest. So she basically dedicated her whole adult life to getting small children to dig holes for her for a treasure that might not even exist, that she can only take her granddad's word on.
Yeah.
And he got this from an unreliable narrator because, after everything that Trout put Kissing Kate Barlow through, there's no way that she's going to necessarily tell him the whole truth.
Yeah, it does seem in character for her to make up a treasure for them to waste their lives looking for.
It does, but I like how Trout Walker wastes her life by, forcing her into going on the run and, to a life of crime. And she's equally not only wasted the rest of his life, but all his descendants.
Also that of his entire line, right down to the one.
I think that's brilliant. And revenge is so good in this movie. It's so sweet when it happens, because, after Sam's shot, I just love how she immediately goes back. She shoots the cop who basically tried to sexually harass her at best. I mean, it's a kids' movie, so they're not going to go further than that. But race issues are done very well, because also later on there's this subplot where Zero wants to learn to read, so he comes to an arrangement with Stanley, who is now befriended, that he'll dig part of his hole because he's a very quick digger. And then Stanley will teach him how to read a bit each day.
Yeah.
And the other kids take exception to this because, they're busy digging their own holes.
Yep.
And they don't like that Stanley gets done quicker. But the two that really take exception to it are Armpit and X-Ray, who are the, only two black kids that we really see.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, you've got your own personal slave. They really take exception to this because... if you've not seen this, then I don't know why you're watching this, like a 40-minute analysis of this movie, but Stanley's white,
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty obvious because he's played by Shia LaBeouf, but if you didn't know, Stanley is white.
And, again, going back to what I said earlier, it's less brought up in the film, but in the book, Stanley's internal monologue basically mentions... there are a couple of black kids there, but race doesn't seem to be a problem, which implies that he's used to that being the case.
Yeah.
So,
to be fair, his family are quite tolerant. They're descended from immigrants.
Do we know exactly when Holes is set? Like, what kind of time period?
I think around present day. The book was written in 1999, I'd like to say. So, 1999, I would say.
Yeah. It isn't time-stamped in any way. Well, the book isn't. The film is by the soundtrack, but...
which is for the best.
Yeah.
But not to an egregious extent.
Nah.
I think that element in the film specifically appeals to me, just because of the subtlety, because of how written it is. It doesn't shy away from anything. It tells us everything. Well, it doesn't even tell us. It shows us everything we need to know. We can piece the rest together.
Yeah. What I was saying was, having seen it, I'd agree with everything you said, but the film wouldn't have sold itself to me, is what I meant by not really. If I hadn't already seen it, I wouldn't have thought of reasons to go and see it.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It doesn't seem like a particularly appetising thing, judging by, the premise. But it basically was successful because of how successful the book was.
Yeah. If I hadn't been made to read the book in English class, I probably wouldn't have read it. And, I'm glad I did.
Yeah, me too.
And, ditto seeing the film.
There's a few tiny little details which I thought were quite funny. The bit where Sam gets shot and he's on his boat. You can see a modern day boy in the water. When I say modern day boy, BUOY.
That is a modern day boy right there.
He can fix anything. He can fix that. Yeah. Another funny little detail that I really liked is kissing Kate Barlow. For a fugitive, she's got perfect teeth.
Yeah, that is true.
Her teeth are immaculately white for somebody who's, been on the run from the law and been a bandit for a considerable period of time.
I think it's just aesthetically very consistent, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Nothing looks out of place.
No, I think that's fair to say. Yeah, and it's shot well. You've got the transitions which are good. Like there's one where, it's when Sam again got shot on the lake. And then the lake transition, in the dawn, goes from the lake to Camp Green Lake today, which is a desert.
Yeah.
And I like how I suppose you could call them supernatural elements are implied rather than, like a thing. Because you've got this whole curse on the family.
Yeah.
Where because the first Stanley Elnats didn't carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain after promising to. His family was cursed, and then they've just had bad luck since. You've got that ever since Sam got shot, it's not rained on Camp Green Lake, which is sort of justice upon Trout Walker.
Yeah, there's a big emphasis on karma in this film.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, as soon as, the treasure's returned to its rightful owner and, it starts raining again, and as soon as Zero is carried up the mountain by Stanley, the bad luck changes, and there's this weird subplot, which was in the book as well, where Henry Winkler, the dad, is trying to invent odorless... No, he's not trying to invent odorless shoes, he's trying to invent something that removes the odour from shoes. And he manages to do it, and it's the onions and the peaches. And the onions is what Sam had, the peaches is what Kate Barlow had. So, there's everything comes together at that point, which is pretty damn good. Another funny thing is, Madame Zeroni being carried up the mountain wouldn't have been that unreasonable, because I looked it up, they're from Estonia, and the highest mountain, inverted commas, in Estonia is 318 metres, because I believe in the Estonian language, the word for mountain is the same as the word for hill.
Yeah.
Because they don't have mountains in Estonia. In the sense that we know them, anyway. They just have very tall hills, apparently. Well, not very tall, 318 metres.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, hauling the pig up the mountain, even when it got heavier, wasn't as impressive as we're led to believe, because, when I was a kid, I pictured like a big-ass mountain.
Yeah.
Question 5. How does the film stack up today?
Well, we've mentioned the dated soundtrack, but other than that, I think it stacks up very well.
And the dated CGI.
And the dated CGI.
Yeah.
Other than those two factors, I think it holds up very well.
I'd agree. I mean, like I said, it'll be just as good in 50 years' time.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly not going to get any worse with age than it already has.
No.
Like, the only two things that age badly have aged as badly as they're going to age.
Okay, I think we've settled that matter. Question 6. Was the film received appropriately at the time?
I think so.
Yeah, it was a financial success. A lot of kids saw it. It must have seen a lot of screenings in schools. I wouldn't say it's underrated because I think, a lot of people know how great it is. All I'd say is if you haven't seen it, then watch it. Why not? It's a 2-hour-long movie. It's only going to take 2 hours out of your life, and I think it will enhance your life.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely worth a watch.
Really nice movie. Really nice. I'm curious to see how well Holes did Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
I will come back and tell you. Turns out that Holes was received 78% on the tomato meter and 76% on the audience score. Although it does seem like the sort that would be equally received by critics and the general audience.
Yeah, there's very little to disagree over in it, if that makes sense.
I think that, shows how much of a universal thing it is.
Yeah, there aren't really any divisive points in Holes.
Aside from Stanley Elnats wearing a MAGA hat.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh. Donald Trump
has doesn't, by the way.
Yeah, Donald Trump has ruined red caps forever.
It's just it's a shame because when I was watching it like the first minute and then when you first see Stanley, I was thinking, what the hell? Why is he wearing a Make America Great Again hat? And then I thought, oh wait, no he isn't. It's just a regular red hat. I'm reading too much into this.
Yeah.
I know that we analyse movies, but, even I was reading too much into that one.
Yeah. I saw that hat and thought of, those hats as well, so... so you're not alone there.
To be somebody alive in 2020, my God.
Yeah. We're all very sorry.
I wonder if, this is gonna pop up on someone's recommended, videos like 6 or 7 years from now. We're going like, oh yeah, Donald Trump was a thing.
We can dream.
Oh dear. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Also, before we go, can we just appreciate how well the kids harmonise at the very beginning of the movie? You know, because they're singing this digging up a hole song, you know, and it sounds really good, even though like half of them would have hit puberty and the other half wouldn't have. You know, like, if they tried that in real life, it would just be a unorchestrated mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I will suspend some disbelief for that.
It was actually really well done.
Alright, I've been Seb, still are.
I've been Ollie, and presumably I will be again.
Hope so.
Yeah.
See you next week, guys.
See you next week.
Bye.